everyone, and welcome back to Venus Pages. Today we're talking about Poem 39 by Alice Walker. As usual, we're going to start with a summary and then dive straight into the line-by-line analysis. So this poem is a powerful elegy written by Alice Walker at 39, which both reflects the almost halfway to a midlife crisis point, so almost halfway through her life, and also probably the age at which she wrote the poem. So in this poem, the speaker reminisces on her father and on how much she misses him. The opening lines quite literally start with the statement, "How I miss my father," and it reflects on Walker's uneasy childhood because on the one hand it was filled with joy and so many lovely things. On the other hand, there were also its issues because it was not easy growing up as a young Black woman in the 1940s, 1950s. So it talks about the way that she was raised and the certain values that her father taught and how it differed from what was expected from her generation, from her race. It raises questions about identity and also about the formative role that our childhood and our parents play in our lives. In it, she also reflects on how it formed her as a writer and as the adult woman that she is today. So it's written in very short sentences, some of them quite monosyllabic, reflecting kind of how simple the emotion is, yet how poignant. And at the same time, the entire poem is written in blank verse, suggesting that there's a sort of simplicity, a sort of unplannedness. It's a way of expressing her thoughts as they come to her, not quite stream of consciousness, but something similar. Basically, uncontrolled flow of thought to highlight that she is reflecting as she moves along, but she's reflecting from an adult-wise perspective. So although she jumps around, and yes, there are good and bad things the way that a person would when they're reflecting, largely this is still quite a more like a rather more structured piece in terms of how it covers certain themes, because it's her coming in to view her childhood from the perspective of the future. So in hindsight, in other words. Without much further ado, let's dive straight into the analysis. So the poem opens with a declarative sentence that directly establishes the key theme and the main message of this poem, which is that Walker misses her father. No matter the things she's about to say, no matter the bad and the good and the whatnot, everything that happened, the main point is that she misses her father and that he is gone. And by saying "how I miss my father," it both accentuates the fact that he's not here with us, but it also accentuates her emotion of longing and reminiscing and the role that he played in her life. And she says, "I wish that he was not so tired when I was born." So she misses him though he was tired when I was born. But it also establishes a really sad link and the reality of adulthood, that some parents have too many burdens to bear on their shoulder. So although he loved her with all his heart, it was still very difficult for him. And when she was born, he was already tired. Tired in this context means that he was both kind of tired from life, exhausted from the weight of the problems, but also tired as in, well, he's getting older. He's not getting any younger. He's moving closer to death. So she just wishes that he had retained some of his usefulness, that she had known that side of him. But unfortunately, it's very, very limited what she knew of him. Nevertheless, she still misses him. That is why she started the poem with that declarative sentence of "how I miss my father." Writing deposit slips and checks, I think of him, he taught me how. This is the form, he must have said, the way it is done. I learned to see bits of paper as a way to escape the life he knew, and even in high school had a savings account. So deposit slips and checks, I think of him. So even now, she shows what triggers the memory. It's a very adult task. When I was born is a very childhood moment, and then we jump straight into this, but I think of him when I write deposit slips and checks still. So we jump from the past to the future. It highlights that that is a time gone. She misses him, she misses her childhood, and yet now the only way for her to remember it is not to live it, but to write checks and deposit and do all of these adult things that come with growing up. And so she thinks of him every time she does it, because he taught her how. So it's a memory triggered by practical skills. It shows her father as a teacher. It shows her father as that guiding figure, not just as someone who was tired, but as someone who managed to guide her even when he was tired. So this is the form, he must have said, the way it is done. But this also highlights that there's a lot of tradition here, that there's values, that there's order, the same way that family plays an integral part in determining who we are and the sort of rules that we follow. Her father, it seems, was a very traditional man who valued that structure, who said this is the way things must be done. And if not only in terms of deposits and checks and finances, but the way things must be done in life more broadly and more generally. He learned to see bits of paper as a way to escape the life he knew. So it shows that there was a correct way of doing things, but for her, paper was also a way of social mobility. So learning accountancy, learning checks, becoming financially independent, becoming self-sufficient, these are all methods for her to escape the life that she had. So although she appreciates it, she never wishes to be like him. She wants to achieve more than her father did. That's why even in high school she already starts saving. She grows up too soon, and even highlights that already as a kid he was treating her as an adult, and she herself was treating her as an adult and saving up to move to bigger, better things. He taught me that telling the truth did not always mean a beating, though many of my truths must have grieved him before the end. So this reveals a more darker side of their relationship. Now, telling the truth does not always mean a beating, but sometimes it does. So there's a lovely message in here that clearly her dad values the truth. Clearly she's learned her lessons early on, since she's this adult young woman who has a savings account in high school. But unfortunately, although he values truth, there are still beatings to come. And this is probably not to, criticize his parenting style, because it was pretty normal back then to beat your children. I know, the horror. But essentially she's just saying that even though there was a darker side to it, even though parents of his generation, well, modern parents would be horrified, there was still a lot of good and a lot of value and a lot of morals in the things he taught, though we may see this as immoral now. And also there's this caesura here, there's a pause, though many of my truths must have grieved him before the end. This pause is supposed to kind of have that shock factor of saying, well, yes, there are things that clearly I've upset my father with, but it also allows us as the reader to consider the gravity of the situation, the fact that there used to be beatings, the way that childhood rearing methods have changed since then. And though many of my truths must have grieved him before the end, though I must have told him many things that made him sad before he died, and clearly there's an implication of not so much regret as wistfulness. Maybe I could have done it in a different way. Maybe I could have told him this slightly better. I think as a whole the poem is more like that she has no regrets because she was trying to live as her father taught her and to carry on the messages that he's trying to impart on her in life. But she's also saying here that many of her truths, so many of the things that she did, and here it's interesting to consider kind of the context of her being in a non-traditional relationship, pursuing a more fluid identity than the cider gender ones that were normal at the time, and just in general her path as a writer, as a creative, which is, well, which I imagine was probably not easy for a very traditional kind of black man of the time to understand, as someone who had to work, physical labor, accountant job day in day, or, well, I don't know what her father did. Maybe it was accountancy because he was financially good, maybe it was something else. And then to, have this creative bohemian life that's very unstable. So it might be that she's referring to as well, because Walker wrote plenty about her journey as a writer too. So there's all these kind of contextual factors to take into account when analyzing this poem, which I think makes this not only very personal, but also deeply human, because it is so intimate in the truths that it covers and in the way that it talks to us as the reader. How I miss my father. He cooked like a person dancing in a yoga meditation and craved the voluptuous sharing of good food. So now the grief returns, the refrain returns, how I miss him, how I miss my father. But now it's more an exclamation, more emotional than first person, because than the first line. He cooked like a person dancing in a yoga meditation. So now we have a new theme. It's joy, it's artistry, it's spirituality, because this is a person who cooks, who does even basic things, like a person who's dancing. He enjoys the simple pleasures of life. Although he's tired, he still gives his heart and his soul. So although he must not always physically show it, he's very, very spiritually into it. He's very joyful. He has that kind of energy that he gives back because he's an incredible person. His cooking is a spiritual dance. He craves the voluptuous sharing of good food. He wants this community. And there's a sort of sensuality in description of good food as voluptuous, as curvy, the way you would describe a beautiful woman who's not just skin and bones, but who has lots of curves to her. So it's voluptuous, this good food. It's something that attracts him deeply. It's something physical. It's something intimate, because he wants that community feeling. He gives back to the community. He urges us all to do so. It also is rich with sensory connotations to use voluptuous, so it almost elevates the entire entire part. He manages to make something simple like cooking, something that is so meaningful to an entire community. And of course, sharing in good food also highlights the kind of community kind values, and the fact that her father is eager to partake in them despite being tired. The fact that he raises her to also care about that community feeling. I look and cook just like him, my brain light, tossing this and that into the pot, seasoning none of my life the same way twice, happy to feed whoever strays my way. Now we move to inheritance and identity, and the speaker realizes that actually she cooks just like him. She doesn't just look like him, she's inherited some of his mannerisms too. And isn't that a wonderful thing, that her father lives on in how she acts? His memory will never die out because it lives in her. And it's a direct statement. My brain likes tossing this and that into the pot. She also cooks as if it's yoga, as if it's meditation, as if it's a calming act. Recipes? Who needs those? She just tosses things into the pot. She goes the way her heart feels, and it shows also her approach to life. That she lives life and come out of it what may. She never seasons anything the same way twice. She never experiences the same things twice because she's always living something novel. And yeah, she can come and make her same recipes, but they will always be accentuated by the fact that there's new, that life moves on. That's her approach to life. She's always happy to do that, and also to share the good things that come out of it, to share the food with anyone, to feed whoever needs feeding, to continue that idea of community that her father started and built. And notice here how there's a lot of enjambments and the lines literally flow into each other, the same way that there's a likeness to her cooking. And the diction of these words, sharp, sweet, it highlights just how the act is. You can almost picture her. It conjures this vivid imagery of her, dancing this way and that, tossing one spice, tossing another. So there's a lot of freedom in the movements that she makes, and this is reflected very much in the sounds of the stanza here. He would have grown to admire the women I've become, cooking, writing, chopping wood, staring into the fire. So there's a reconciliation here. Yeah, of course, there were truths that must have disappointed him, but look, I'm just like him, I'm carrying on his legacy, and I'm sure that if he was alive, he would appreciate the women I've become. Women, plural. She's not just one woman, she's many, she's several. She can both cook, the traditional, she can write, the more neutral, and she can chop wood. So all three gender roles, because cooking was traditionally considered a feminine activity, chopping wood traditionally masculine, writing something neutral. So all three activities can be found in her. So there is something of her in everything that she does. She's very fluid in her identity. And maybe he would have admired all three parts of her. Maybe he would have grown to embrace her non-traditional identity. And in fact, not maybe, she's sure he would have. It's not a question. It's not maybe he would have. It's he would have, and then a colon, the woman she's become. So he would have admired specifically the woman she's become. It's her growth. Also notice the ascendant, the mission of conjunctions between chopping wood, writing, cooking. So the list without and creates a sense of all of this being equal, being continuous, the same way that her identity is very continuous. In conclusion, the poem wraps up with all these themes of complex identity and grief and loss and the way that a person's legacy lives on. So it's a beautiful poem, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next week.